What's good, everybody? I'm Jędrek, and this is my Jeskai Ephemerate primer. So before we begin, I've already made one of those for familiars, and I do consider familiars and ephemerate to be like the two different sub-archetypes of the same macro archetype. So while I will try to make this video or keep it as self-contained as possible, I will probably make a bunch of references to familiars, both like in comparing Jeskai to familiars in some aspects where they are similar and aspects that they differ from each other. So it's probably good to watch the familiars video as well. It will be linked in the description. It's not absolutely necessary, but it will probably provide you with some context along the way. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Right from the get-go, the very first sentence already making a parallel to familiars. Jeskai, just like familiars, is an Ephemerate Archaeomancer engine deck, which is the way you will win most of your games. And while familiars are looking to accelerate their game plan by using their namesake card and snap, Jeskai instead tries to slow the opponent down, and at the same time build the mana advantage with Bender's Waterskin, which is, I think, a crucial part of the deck that I will discuss later on at length. So basically, the Ephemerate Archaeomancer package requires you to get some tempo, not even tempo advantage, but like tempo differential, let's say. And you can either do that by accelerating yourself the way that FAMs do, or by decelerating your opponent by interacting with them. And then you accelerate yourself a bit with Waterskin, which is also important once again. The goal is, just like in FAMs, a lot of those slides will have very exact same wording as FAMs, because once again, those decks are very similar in my opinion. The goal is to stabilize the game and then snowball past the point of no return. After achieving this goal, winning is usually trivial, aside from, once again, time constraints, which might be even more so pronounced in terms of this deck than it was with FAMs, because Jeskai does not run any sort of infinite loops. You can't make arbitrarily large number of bird tokens that will just win the game in the one turn cycle, but you actually have to work for your wins a bit more sometimes. And the main way of generating card advantage, once again, are creatures with ETB effects combined with Ephemerate. Only have Augur, Muldrafter, and Archaeomancer, of course, in this version. I guess it's the same rough count as in Familiars, because you're just playing Augur instead of Seagate. So strengths of Jeskai, once again, it's one of the most inevitable decks in Pauper. The Archaeomancer Ephemerate engine goes over the top of basically everything if uninterrupted, because it just results in having endless supply of counter magic and interaction, card draw, and everything else if it goes uncontested. Scred is the biggest pickup for the deck, probably for going into red. Because if you support it correctly with Snow mana base, then it's one of the best removals in the format. Scales very well into late game. It can kill stuff early. It doesn't cost you life like Snuff Out does. It's very easy to cast it multiple times per turn with Archaeomancer. Because it's a 3-color deck, you have access to wide range of cards, both main deck and sideboard. And once again, because you can choose from such a wide card pool, this deck has a very high card quality, in my opinion, compared to some other Pauper decks, and customization options depending on the metagame you expect. Weaknesses, on the other hand, I think the mana base is quite bad, and this is by far the biggest holding point of Jeskai, I think. If you want to pinpoint something that makes the deck not as prevalent or as good as I think it is, this is the mana base that is prone to be clunky. It's prone to color screw you now and again. And yeah, a lot of tap lands. You often start the game on like turn 2 or 3 really. It's rather hard to have untapped islands on the first turn of the game. Well, you have 7 islands, so it's not out of this world, but like, for example, quite often when you are like on a draw against Madness, you have to have like both an island and a blast post board to like interact with them in time, and it is rather challenging to do that. Ogre of Bolas isn't the greatest enabler. I think that it's significantly weaker than Seagate is in FAMs. I've tried to play Seagate in this deck as well, but without getting the discount from Familiar, Seagate was a bit too bad. And also you already have other 3 mana plays in Waterskin. So it just clamps up the curve a bit too much by playing so many frees. And unlike Familiars, Jeskai doesn't really have those super like explosive turns with snap and bounce lands and Familiars to like generate, I don't know, like 3 extra mana on turn 3 or 4. So playing a 2-drop instead of a 3-drop, that's like a big difference. The curve is fairly high, which was even more exacerbated with Seagate in my little experiment. But even with Ogre, the curve is somewhat high, and that's another reason why I really like Bender's Waterskin, because it just produces so much mana over the course of the game that you can like further mitigate your Hive curve. And it is somewhat hurt by most types of interaction. Just like FAMs, sometimes Graveyard Hate will get you, sometimes Removal, Discard, Counter Magic. You can beat all of those, but not all at once. So this is the list that I would roughly recommend playing right now. I think that Negate can become a 5th blast in the board. You can put Fanged Flames into main deck and play the second torch in the sideboard instead. There are some means of customization. This list only has 3 Ogre of Bolas, because once again, I think Ogre is kinda underwhelming, but you still need early plays with Ephemerate. So from the list that I've had the most success with, I've cut 1 Ogre of Bolas and played for Mulldrifter instead, because I do think that Mulldrifter is really, really, really important for this deck. Other than that, pretty standard set of cards. I also think that Brainstorm number 2 is probably worse than Preordain number 3, especially with less Ogres. Preordain, I think, is better than Brainstorm in this deck, but you still want some Brainstorms to have like setup with Mulldrifters with Ogres for a guaranteed hit, especially in matchups where guaranteeing a hit is really important, like Jant or something. Other than that, I will probably talk about all of those cards later on. So card advantage. Once again, this is the main way of getting extra value with this deck. Of course, you can also hardcast Lorien Revealed, but for the most part, you are getting up on cards by casting those creatures and ephemerating them. Mulldrifter, once again, it's probably the best creature in the deck, even though Archaeomancer is like the crucial piece of your endgame. Mulldrifter just glues everything together. It's a acceptable 3 mana play. It's a good 5 mana play, and it's a great play with Ephemerate on 4 or 5. I like that it curves very nicely with Waterskin. You Waterskin on 3, do something with your mana from Waterskin, and then on turn 4 you can just hardcast Mulldrifter. Or if you Ephemerate on turn 4 with Waterskin already in play, you have 2 mana on your opponent's turn to like protect your Mulldrifter counterspell, so your Ephemerate doesn't get stranded in the exile zone and whatnot. Archaeomancer, once again, crucial part of your endgame, and most of your wins will involve Archaeomancer loops in some shape or form. And Ogre of Bolas, it's just the glue that the deck kinda needs, even though, once again, I am looking for better alternatives to Ogre. If something like that gets printed, this is like by far the biggest potential upgrade for the deck, short of like Arcum's Astrolabe getting unbanned. Getting like a 2-mana Seagate Oracle, or even like 2-mana 1/3 that cantrips. Because I think 1/1s are a bit too bad, because having a 1/3 body is really nice in the early game against many aggressive decks in Pauper. So yeah, I think 2-mana 1/3 that just draws upon entering would be better than Augur, and I would definitely try it over the Merfolk. Win cons, of course, we have once again Archaeomancer with Ephemerate is like the main win condition, but as far as dedicated win cons go, those are the cards that I like, somewhere in the 75. I think Murmuring Mystic is like the biggest, the most common win con, and it used to be a staple in the archetype. These days, I think some people are pivoting out of it. For a moment, I had 0 in my deck, but because of the omnipresence of Sneaky Snacker, I do think that having some Murmuring Mystic is important to contest the airspace against Mystics, or against Snackers, sorry. And also Refurbished Familiar is another creature that you ideally don't want to spend removal spells for, and Mystic just creates a body that trades with Refurb. Visionary's Dance is a somewhat new addition from Strixhaven, or from Secrets of Strixhaven, which is like a nice bridge between, or a nice compromise between a cantrip and a win con. You can just use it early to clear off the brainstorm, or to just dig towards cards that you need at any given moment. And later on, it just creates 2 free flyers, which is like, those are significant bodies in Pauper. So right now I'm playing only 1 copy, and it's a card that gets boarded out very, very often. But I think it's a nice game 1 card because, once again, it's a win con, it's a cantrip, it's a win con that's findable with Ogre of Bolas, which is really important with Ogre still in the deck. So this card probably wouldn't be in my deck if Ogre wasn't like exclusively looking for instants and sorceries. But for now, I think Visionary's Dance is good enough to earn at least 1 spot in the main deck, maybe 2 even. And finally, Goliath Paladin is a card that I play in the sideboard. I wouldn't really play it in the main deck, at least in the current configuration with Ogre. But there are many matchups against which getting initiative is really, really powerful, like Gardens, like Mirror, Familiars. I really like it against Avenging Hunter's deck, because an Avenging Hunter deck has trouble killing Goliath Paladin, really. Maybe aside from Gardens, but Gardens isn't really like a Hunter deck. I'm mostly talking Elves and like Red-Green. A 3/6 body is very good against those decks, especially if you manage to put 2 counters on it from the forged part of Initiative. It gets Initiative really well thanks to Vigilance, and you can Ephemerate it to get back Initiative if they play Hunter. There are so many games where you have the game like reasonably under control, and the only thing you can lose to is Initiative on the other side of the board, and you really need to keep your creatures on defense. So you can't like take Initiative in combat, and Goliath Paladin is really good there. I also like it against Red Madness because they usually have a lot of Red Blasts against you post board, and having like a non-blue way of getting advantage is really nice against them. Similarly to cards like, I've tried some unfathomable truths for a second in this deck, which is like 5 mana, draw 3, make a spawn with Devoid, so it's not blue, it can be countered. And it was also nice against Madness because they can't do anything about it, and you just draw 3 in their end step. But yeah, that's about it when it comes to win conditions. Interaction. So, of course, once again, Scred is the very, very important piece of this deck. It's a crucial removal spell that makes being reactive feasible. And just 1 mana kills most things in the format at most stages of the game. Like, there are very few creatures that get like a head-on curve in terms of like toughness to mana ratio in Pauper. The most common would be Terrors and Chrysalis. But even against Chrysalis, like if you are on the play and they turn for Chrysalis, you untap, play your 5th land and Scred. On the draw, you have to take like 1 attack. So yeah, mostly Terror is the point I would look to for having like this mismatch between the mana cost and the toughness being the worst. Next up, we have Counterspell, which is the premier counter magic piece in the deck. A double blue cost can be rough sometimes, but the deck is structured in a way to get double blue as reliably as possible, really, within like reasonable constraints, of course. And just having a hard counterspell at all stages of the game is really nice in a deck that's looking to trade 1-for-1, obviously. And finally, the spell might look a bit out of place as a main deck card, but truth be told, most Pauper decks runs a healthy bit of instants. There are very few decks that run 0 instants. It's mostly like Lead the Stampede creature decks. And against a lot of decks, you will just get a good amount of value from this spell countering, like a Fanatical Offering or a removal spell, like counter spell, sometimes even like a combo piece or a card advantage spell. So this spell is also really good at protecting your own game plan. So like you go for Muldrifter Ephemerate, and this spell being like a 1 mana way of protecting that from counter magic or removal is really, really crucial. So I do encourage you to play the spell in your Ephemerate deck. I think it's rather a good addition. Then we have Cantrips. Two main cantrips that I would consider for this deck are Preordain and Brainstorm. I do think that Preordain, once again, is the better of the two, but some Brainstorms are also warranted as long as Augur of Bolas is in the deck. I think without Augur, I would just play for Preordain. But with Augur, I think I want some Brainstorms in the deck, be it 1 or be it 2. Preordain is just such a better top deck. If you don't have any shuffle effects, Preordain is basically the best thing to draw without a shuffle effect. If you have shuffle effect, of course, Brainstorm can be higher ceiling. Like you have a fetch land lying around, because in this deck it's very common to just have fetch lands lying around for like multiple turns, because you use colorless mana rather well. You just tap it to get ahead on board or to make your meaningful plays, and then you find yourself with a fetch land and like 1 or 2 lands in hand, and Brainstorm actually nets you more than 1 relevant cards. But for the most part, Preordain is a better starting hand card, a better top deck in the late game in most cases, because it's an unconditionally good top deck. And yeah, just an excellent card in this deck. Then we have Mana Base. Mana Base is fairly straightforward. The Snow-Covered Island represents all the snow-covered lands in the deck that you have to play to accommodate for Skred. Every land in the deck is either a snow land or is a fetch land that can find a snow land. Lorien, once again, it's one of the best cards in Pauper, in my opinion. If you're playing a blue deck, you should play for Lorien's Revealed. If you could play more than 4, you should play more than 4, but you can't. There are probably some exceptions. Like I get not playing Lorien and Mono Blue Fairies, for example. But other than that, Lorien is like a staple, and I wouldn't leave home without 4 Loriens in my deck if I was playing blue. Waterskin is, once again, a really important part of this deck. It costs 3 mana, but it will often give you at least 1 mana back on the turn cycle you play it. And if you ever get to use it twice, like you play it on 3, you kill something, and then on your opponent's turn, like, I don't know, or you cantrip on yours, kill something on your opponent's turn, you ephemerate your turn to Augur, or you just play 2 removal spells, you cycle Lorien, whatever. If you manage to get 2 mana out of it on the initial turn cycle you play it, it's essentially like a 1 mana rock, which is absurd. And it helps you fix your colors. You can like reasonably keep 3 islands and Waterskin, and like turn 2 Counterspell or Augur, turn 3 Waterskin, use your Waterskin to cast a non-blue card that you couldn't cast before. Really, getting 2 mana over the course of the turn cycle can't be underestimated. It's really, really, really strong. And I would Probably play 4 copies, if not for Augur, because once again, that the most annoying thing about Augur really is that it can't find water skin. But if at some point we find a list, likely because the card gets printed, that can replace Augur, or maybe there is a list out there that doesn't really need 2 mana creatures. I've tried it as well, just having no 2 mana Ephemerate targets, but you get a bit too behind on tempo early on, and your Ephemerates are a bit too bad without a 2 mana play to Ephemerate. So for now, I'm playing 3 water skins, but I would very closely look at the 4th one to have an extra copy, just because it's like such a great 3 mana play. The biggest strike against playing 4 is probably that you don't really want 2 in your opening hand, and it gets a bit easier to flood if you have 4 water skin in your deck, but like past turn 5 or 6 you want to have 2 water skins very often, because then you have like so much mana to work with, and you rarely run out of cards really if everything goes well. Moving on to sideboards, once again we're gonna ask the same question as we asked in the Familiar's Guide. What makes a good sideboard card? It's cheap, ideally costing 1 mana. Furthermore, if the card costs 0 mana, then it at least deserves a very close look. Like, once again, Gutshot, which is a card I would very seriously consider for Pauper if they didn't ban Seeker of the Skybreak, because as of the time of me recording this video, Seeker has been banned for a bit under a week. And yeah, if we have like a prominent combo deck that revolves around 1 toughness creature, then Gutshot is obviously a great card. If the card is not cheap, then it needs to be completely game altering. It has to be either versatile or extremely effective in the intended matchups, and it should be aligned with your game plan. So for example, if you are playing against Giant or Affinity and your games usually go to like turn 15 or 20, I don't think going after their lands is a great idea, because like they will draw out of it. So examples of the good sideboard cards, obviously, those are very, very targeted cards that are extremely good in the matchups you bring them in. Like if you bring Goliath by Aladdin or the Blast into your deck, they will be extremely good in most cases. Like sometimes you will have like a Hydro Blast against makeshift munitions or from Giant or Affinity, and sometimes it will be like it will misalign, but for the most part those cards are like extremely potent sideboard pieces for the matchups that you want them in. More of those cheap cards. Fanged Flames is a way to get Guardian of the Guild Pact, and also another exile-based removal for Sneaky Snacker. And Brave Weapon is a more expensive card, but it's a card that can swing the game on its own against like Elves or White Winnie or Fairies or Rally. If you draw your first Brave Weapon, it's usually really good in these matchups if it resolves. Cards I wouldn't recommend playing, once again, shout out to the card I hate the most, or maybe not hate, but I think it's the most overrated cards in those decks, which is Dust to Dust. I just don't think that playing Dust to Dust accomplishes much. It is uncastable in this deck so often because double white cost is even more prohibitive here than in FAMs, even with Bender's Waterskin. And once again, going after your opponent's lands isn't something you want to do against Giant or Affinity, I think. It's much better to have Seal Sabotage that can actually fight the cards that harm you on the stack, because like those cards technically can target any artifact, but the artifacts you really care about, like the damage is done when they resolve. Like you don't want to exile Nihil Spellbomb. You don't want to exile Refurbished Familiar or Blood Fountain or Ichor Wellspring. You want to counter those things because once they hit the board, they will generate some value. Which is why I recommend sticking to the card I've had earlier, Steel Sabotage. If you want to beat artifact decks, I think Steel Sabotage is a better option. Cast into the Fire is here also mostly for the exile target artifact clause. If you feel like you need a bit extra, like small ball removal, then I can see playing cast into your sideboard, because getting the extra exile like isn't terrible. But also, I don't think you should be acting like that's the way to beat like Affinity, and you're like, oh, I'm so prepared for Affinity because my 75 has like 3 casts or something. I don't think that's the way it goes. I think Suplex is a bit different. That's why it's not here, because Suplex is a card you can reasonably main deck as 3 mana, kill something and exile it. It's pretty okay when you are playing in the Snacker metagame. Sorry. And having a main deck way of this exiling artifacts is also a bit nice. So I think Suplex is the most defensible out of all those cards. Then we have the Archaeomancer lock once again. This is how you win most of your games, and you should learn how to use it well. So you have to develop this like gut feeling when you need to risk it and try to like go for it without any protection, and when it's better to like maybe you have like Archaeomancer and you have 2 or even sometimes 3 Ephemerates going. You have to learn when you should keep at least 1 Ephemerate back and not just get like full value out of it, but like using 2 Ephemerates per or 1 Ephemerate per turn cycle is good enough if you have that other one protecting you from getting your graveyard exiled by Trade Charm or getting your Archaeomancer killed in response, something like that. So like you should study opposing deck lists, and you should know how many backup Ephemerates you need in various spots. For example, like you're going against elves, you have everything under control. So the only thing you're losing to is like maybe a Fairy Macabre that disrupts your lock. It's less common in Jeskai than this particular example against elves is less common in Jeskai, because you don't really have like Archaeomancer, Ephemerate, and Ethereal Haze or Stonehorn Loop that actually needs to be protected that closely. If you are playing like Haze or Stonehorn in your sideboard, then it is more important to have like spare Ephemerates to play around like Fairy Macabres and stuff like that. But even in normal games, your opponent can top deck a removal spell, and if you only have 1 Archaeomancer, you do want to preserve it in most cases. So yeah, you just have to judge whether you need to go for it with all your Ephemerates to pull ahead, or are you ahead enough to play a bit more cautiously. Yep. And then some tips and tricks. So Muldrifter and Ephemerate effectively puts you 2 cards up 2 cards in hand, and then potentially more in the next upkeep, which is important when you are trying to manage your hand size and not avoid discarding to hand size in the cleanup. Which is not the end of the world, but in some matchups that are very about card like Jund, you don't really want to like Muldrifter Ephemerate, go to 10 cards, discard 3, then your Muldrifter gets killed, and your Ephemerate gets stranded in the exile, and effectively you are not really up on cards, even though you did the thing that it's supposed to be really, really good in the matchup. So when you are trying to play Muldrifter and Ephemerate, try to plan so you can use most of your cards, be it to cast more water skins or to interact with your opponent. I would be more incentivized to like quote unquote throw away my counter magic on less important things if I will draw towards more cards in my next upkeep, but still like protecting your Muldrifter so it gets ephemerated in the upkeep is very important. So it's just, once again, something to think about and not just jam mindlessly if you have the opening. Brainstorm can set up your Ogre of Bolas for a guaranteed hit. I already mentioned that. That's the most important part of Brainstorm, I think, in this deck. Remember that you can sacrifice Bender's Waterskin to Torch the Tower. So Torch the Tower is a card that I currently play in 2 copies, and it has Bargain. which is sacrifice a token, artifact, or enchantment to make it deal 3 instead of 2, and you scry 1. So you can sacrifice Water Skin, or you can sacrifice Murmuring Mystic tokens, or like a treasure or skeleton you get from initiative technically as well, or Visionary Dance tokens. But for the most part, you won't really sacrifice Bender Water Skin too often because it's such an important piece of your game plan. But sacrifice bird tokens come up a good deal. So just remember that you can bargain those cards. And try to plan your game a few turns ahead. This is obviously just a very generic magic advice to look ahead in the future, but it is especially important when it comes to things like cycling Lorien, because your deck is mana hungry. You want to make land drops every turn, but you also are somewhat prone to flooding, and you don't want to cycle that's especially common when you have a hand that's you open a hand that is 1 land, Water Skin, 3 Loriens as your mana sources, and 2 pieces of interaction or Ogre or whatever. You don't want to cycle all your Loriens ASAP, because if you flood with this hand, if you just draw 1 or 2 more lands, you are suddenly very, very likely to run out of cards. So I would usually wait for as long as possible with the last Lorien, even sometimes at the cost of being a bit mana inefficient. You just untap. If you don't draw a land for turn and you still need to make your land drop number 4 or 5, then you just cycle Lorien on your turn. But yeah, keep that in mind, that Lorien is required to be a spell slightly more often here than in Fans. Okay, and that's it. So thank you for watching this video. I'm sorry that I'm a bit sneezy. I think I just got cold because of AC and stuff like that. Even though I don't have an AC at home, but I was at a shopping mall yesterday and it was rather chilly there. Not important at all, but yeah. Thank you for watching this video. I will have all my links in the description. There will be a link to my Metaphy, to Mystical Teachings website. And you can expect more content both on Metaphy and on Teachings before Pauper. At the time of you watching this video, the Jeskai guide should be already on Metaphy, and if it's not, it's gonna be there very shortly. So yeah, thanks for supporting our content as always. All the links down below. And yeah, have a great day. Bye bye.